Okay, so we've got a really lovely tropical seascape today, landscape seascape, and there's a lot of lovely choices there. So, we've got this one, which I'm going to demonstrate because I've just drawn to this, and I think you should go to what you're drawn to and explore. And my sky is quite simplistic, but I just love the variation in the foliage. It's very different to ours, which is why I thought that'd be nice to explore some of the lovely palms and things like that and the leaves. But of course, you could do a little bit more of that close up. This has got some different coloured skies in. When we're layering these up, we need to be thinking about which bit of the sky comes first and then, getting those others on top. So the only thing I would say to be careful of with these two particularly, and that one at the top and the middle bit, is to get that blue sky in behind before you, and maybe even let it dry before you get these on. Otherwise, you'll end up with yellows and blues. We'll end up with a bit of green perhaps. So probably best to let that dry. And actually, you can do that quite easy because these do overlap the blue sky anyway. This one, where it merges a little bit more, you can, where you've got all warm colours or warmish colours or similar colours like these pinks and purples, and then these a few orangey pinks as well. You can kind of get a little bit of a blend in them without it causing too much kind of muddiness. So it's just about exploring those different colours, finding something you're really drawn to, and then drifting away into this beautiful tropical paradise. So whichever you fancy, this one's got a lot more water, lots of ripples, so you'll need to get your shadows in there, and then the other mid-tone colours before you get those little highlights where it bounces. And those highlights could be any particular colour. And then with this one, you might need to kind of divide your page up so that you can work out the perspective of everything and where everything sits. I'd probably advise that. So going back to this one, which is the one I've chosen to do. There we go, better. Just jumping around today. Then I'm going to, first of all, just get some lovely colours. I'm going to just map it out a little bit. But again, just remember when you're doing this yourself, make sure it's really nice and lightly done with a pencil because we do get that muddiness for sure. Now, if it helps to do a little 4/4 grid on there to work out where everything is, you can. Of course, you don't have to do that at all. I might just put a centre point here. I'll do that quite lightly. You'll still be able to see that, but everything else I'll go in a bit more darkly with. Um, and um, and then we've got an idea. But again, all these different proportions. If you will say wanted more sea in there and less sky, of course you can do that. Absolutely, just adjust everything accordingly, really. So I'm bringing this beach up a little bit because I just love that. It's really nice. So all I'm doing now is kind of just putting where the sea's going. If you've got like a horizon, you can always get a bit of tape and use the tape and just paint above it and then move the tape when it's dry in the sky and paint below it if you want it perfectly straight, and then you can go over. That's something we can do. So I might do that to start with just to make it a little bit more neat. Pop that there. You don't have to. You can put a bit of paper there if you wanted. And then all I'm going to do then is I'm looking at this section here. And I'm just going to work out how far into this, which is that there, I'm going to bring in some of the foliage. Now all I'm going to do is just put a kind of a block here, just a block of what I think is coming. And then same with this, I'm going to bring this all the way in again. In there. And then I'm going to just put a kind of a big block of where this kind of mound of lovely foliage is, this lovely bush here. And again, it's really, really simply drawn because we're going to end up adjusting things a lot anyway. So I'm not going to go into massive detail, I just want to get it in. And then things like this, obviously there's a kind of a section here where we've got a bit of a palm. I'm not going to draw that out. I'm just going to get some blocks in so that I've got an idea of what comes in. There's a big palm here, just bringing up some of the foliage behind the palm there. And then we've kind of got all these lovely palms poking out the top here behind, which is obviously I'll need to do that over the top of the blue. I'm not even going to bother doing any palm trees. So these little ones are going to go over the top of everything else. I'm going to wait until I've got all this foliage in and then layer up the next layer. What I am going to do is make sure I bring the sky right into anywhere that may, you know, have a gap between it so that we can then paint that over the top. So it might mean I have to flatten this little bit again, which is absolutely fine. And that's where we are. So thinking about your sky colours, you're just looking at what colour you know you want to put underneath it. A lot of these colours are quite, what I'd say, cerulean colour is what I've tended to go for. You could try a phthalo blue as well, if that helps. I've gone in with cerulean because I like it. I did put a slightly different tone of blue in there today as well, just because it's nice to try. So I think I've just got cobalt, but oh no, it's ultramarine. So I might have a little bit, add a little bit of this to a different section. There's a slight different colour down here. So I'm going to add that, probably add that into the mix. So bring those two blues out. And oh gosh, that's gone mad. Right, there we go. And then some white, because of course, when we're doing a tint, mixing up a tint, and I've got these clouds as well, we do need some white in there. You can still vary your sky, even if it's just one colour. So we want what's coming very far behind at the moment, which obviously is it's the blue sky showing through pretty much on all of them, I think, behind, except for the one with the palm trees, the silhouette palm of the palm trees, whereas it's quite dark at the top and then the rest of it's different colours. So if you're doing, that's the only one that's slightly different. If you're doing that one, you'll need to kind of get a few of these colours ready at the same time, and then you can like blend some together. And I think this dark area here almost seems like it's coming over the top anyway. So you're looking at the colours behind that as well. This one is just, yeah, like a variation. So like I am going to vary my sky a little bit, even though it's very serene and very calm, which is what I love about it. I'm going to create where, you know, a little bit of a mix where it's slightly darker in places. Underneath where it's light, I'm just going to go in and make a lighter tint underneath the clouds, even where I'm going to put the clouds, and then build the clouds up on the top. Now I can apply the clouds when it's still damp if I want to kind of blend them in a little bit. But it depends on how warm the room is. So it's going to mix up. I can see what's happened to my tis. I had it this morning. Just bear with me. It's not wanting to come out today. I've got a pipette thing in here. There we go. Pipette and a palette knife. It doesn't want to come out of the tube. It's really misbehaving today. Right, just gonna fill up the pipette with a bit of water. So yes, we're just really exploring these sky colours that are behind these clouds before I do anything else. So move some of my colours into the middle, the darker one and the lighter one. And you can test them. I'm going to test them over here. Just move these, don't need all these brushes out at you. So I'm just testing, you know, how dark I want this, how dark I want the top. A bit darker, I think. When we're adding white, it's just taking out a bit of the colour that it does. Let's give that a try with a thin brush. Very small around. Okay, quite like that. So this is just cerulean blue on its own. Each of the cerulean blues in the kits are different. The phthalo blue makes quite a nice bright colour as well. So I'm just using one pot for my skies and another pot for kind of the warmer colours. And then I want some lighter areas in there as well. So I'm going to bring in some more white, those other areas. Just make it slightly lighter. Quite like that. I might bring that under some of those. That's really bright, actually. I really like that one. And that's the other thing, isn't it? We're bringing in our preferences. So if you mix a colour and you think, oh, I really love that, then use that. Isn't it? Almost like the sea here. So I think what I'm going to do as well, this colour down here feels slightly different to me. So I'm going to just try a bit of this ultramarine as well, with some light. And I'm going to add a bit of cerulean to that as well. So I'm really bringing in some variety. All right. This is the joy of the experimental phase. Really lovely. Just have a little play around, mixing different colours, trying the blues, different blues you've got in your set as well. So you might not have these specific colours in, but you might have some ones that you've not used before that you think, I'll try these. Great opportunity to try them. You may even have some kind of, turquoisey colours that you want to explore as well. I'm just going to use that a little bit just on this bit here. So we've got a real lot of variation there. So I'm going to use some of this kind of up here underneath there, the dark blue at the top, this one at the bottom, and then I'm just going to make a bit of a combination in the middle. This light one and this dark one. So it's almost like I'm making my way down and I'm just pop in, making it lighter as I go. Sometimes towards the horizon it gets lighter, and other times it's just certain spots in there. And let's try. And the reason I'm mixing them all up is that when I start painting with these, because they're all blues, I can just start to blend them all as I'm using them without them drying out too quickly. Because again, it depends where you are. Like I'm in the garden, little studio shed, and it's very warm in here, so it's drying really quickly. Whereas this morning it was quite cool still in our hall, because we've not got the heating on, which we don't need now. So things were, you could blend for a bit longer. So we really have to adapt acrylic depending on the environment we're working with it in. The warmer it is, the quicker it's going to dry. You might need to actually add more water to it. So we get a bit of water in there, a couple of drops in. We want plenty on our brush. We want enough paint so we've got plenty to move about and blend. And we want plenty so that we want a little bit of fluid in there so we can actually, the liquid, so it is quite fluid and buttery and it will move that base colour really easily. We don't want it to be hard work. So I'm just going to try off these last couple of colours here for these blues, just for the sky. Let's see, I've tried that one. Let's try this one. Just a bit at the bottom. Yes, I like that. Just see, can't we, just how different they are. I use different blues. And then this one's my midway point. Okay, yeah, I'm happy. I've got a good combination, good different trying these. I'm just going to kind of really pop them all together, actually, is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go in here because I really like, get a really good blend when you've got a flat brush, and I do like a flat brush. I'm going to go a bit smaller because my board's a bit smaller. I had a really big brush this morning because I had a really big canvas, so I'm going down a little bit. I suppose this is an A5 board, and this is a size 8 flat. But again, they vary. Don't worry too much about all of the different brands do slightly different sizing. Aha. I was just thinking, what's different? Why is that taking me a bit more effort? Because I've not got my tape on. Just pop a bit of tape on, which just makes it easy to kind of quite seamlessly go over the edges there, look, and then I won't have to been taking too much care with it when I just want to get into the flow of my painting. I'll just pop a bit of tape there so that I can. Painting my arm while I go. I do quite like taping things up, it makes it so much easier. Right, so I'm going to keep bringing these colours in now. Put these colours in at the top. Now, of course, if you find it easy, you can always, this is drying really fast actually, you can always, a little bit on that side bit there. So you shouldn't have any drag marks. It should cover get into the grain. If you've got, even if you've got a board or some thick, canvas paper, it should get into there quite easily. So I'm just going to now bring that in. So bringing these colours in behind, and then just going backwards and forwards really on the edges here. And then it will just blend really nicely with that flat brush as we go. A few different, keep these colours going. And some lighter ones and go in there. And again, just using that flat. Just getting the edges together, and eventually those edges will just disappear. And then where it's much lighter, I'm just going to go in underneath where these clouds are going to go. I'm just going to bring in this blend as well, a bit of this. And those clouds will go. Just to add a bit of variety to it. And then where I think it's going to go here, I'm not sure, bring this down. Bring it right down in there. Flat brush, just drag it down into where I think it's going to be any gaps, so there's no gaps. You can always, we can always take this out anyway. And then you can just have a little go back over anything where you want to make any changes. Do you want to go in lighter? Is there I've missed this bottom colour here, which I quite like. So I'm just going to get this because it does feel slightly different in tone down here. And make sure that's in. And again, I'll make sure that's really nicely blended in. Now, if the flat brush doesn't work, say for example, doing something like this, then you can just put the paint on and then use the blending brush to put these two layers together. The dome brush, which is really handy. Just damp the edge a little bit and then just just bring those two edges together so that you don't end up with a. Sometimes people love a real stripe and other people are not sure about it. So you can really soften that down in that way if it's not a different colour. Just keep going on, get all of these bits in place before I start to think about any clouds. And just make sure I've got the blues I want in there. It's so nice, aren't they? go really. So I'm just going to kind of explore that a little bit. If there's anything that a little bit dark and you think I want to pop in something darker, I'll tell you, you can always put it back in. Get it while it's still damp. Sometimes we can overblend the layers and take out the ones that we wanted in. I'm just going to pop those back in there. Okay. Right, give that a really good rinse off now. So any layers we've got over the top of the kind of clouds, these are obviously the fluffier clouds, but you may find that you've got layers on here where, you know, it's got that softness to it, and it's like working out how we're going to put it on. So it's about choosing a colour and then building up the softness there. So I'll show you it with the dome brush and without. So with the cloud here, it's very light. You might be seeing other colours. You may be thinking, oh, well, I can see a tiny bit of a pinkish colour. Other people might think, no, it's just white, but it's different kind of thin, you know, thickness or thinness. I'm just going to pop a little bit of hint out here, but you could use a little bit of red with your white either way. I'm not sure I can see it myself at the moment. But some of these clouds will be, you know, the way they layer up, some of them will be feel quite rounded and others will feel quite linear, like there's some little ones at the bottom here. The key with clouds and with acrylics as well, so I'm just going to get some of the white here and I'm going to thin it down quite a lot. So the beauty with acrylics is we can layer up much thinner layers on top of thicker layers, and it's absolutely fine, and it just helps it become a bit more translucent. So I'm going to make a tiny tint up, really small. So I've got the smallest amount of blue in there at the moment. Smallest amount of blue. It just means that it's just slightly less bright. So the only way we can tell if it's going to work is just by trying it, basically. So I won't know until I get that on the paper how thick it is or whether it needs to be a bit thicker. So I'm thinking about these ones at the bottom, and also how much white to put in. So it's one of those trial and error. This is why experimenting is great. And I'm just going to use, because I've got these this flat brush, I'm going to just kind of make this little dragging, just broken up little areas on here. So the flat brush is still really good for that kind of cloud that feels, you know, a little bit. You can drag those down before I go on to these kind of much rounder clouds. And again, how thick it is and how bright is just dependent on how much you thin it down with water. So it's less bright with water on it. But you can build up each layer slightly more. So I could actually take a little bit more white and make it more pigmented and less thin. And if there's any spots where it's catching, where I think, oh, actually, I want that to be a bit brighter in there. That's where I'm thinking, you know, it's building up. It gives the cloud a little bit more depth. And just add that in little spots. I'm only doing it to a couple of bits because I don't want it all everywhere because the whole thing isn't really bright, but we'll pick out the ones that we feel like. And you can just use the edge of your brush there to kind of get these thinner ones and then build it up from there. So, you know, have a little look. If you've got anything that you think, oh, it's just like over here, it feels like there's quite a bit of cloud over the top there, but I can't quite, you might not be able to quite see where. You can use the same brush or you can switch over to a round. What do you think? And you can just bring it over and just drag it about a little bit. And do that with your flat over the top. This is where I want it really translucent, and I'm just making shapes with my brush, really, like these curly shapes. Now that's a very thin, which is exactly what I want. I don't want that to be really bright because this is the cloud that's just kind of very wispy. It'll look strange on close up to start with, but that's okay. Don't worry about that. and then it's much darker behind there. So this is where I'm going to use my initiative and just put more pigment in. Just get that in behind those clouds. Just build up that. Now, if you don't want some like really harsh lines, you want to just build it up a little bit, then you can get some on. I'm going to do it more when we come to this bit, that bit there. Where it's a bit brighter, you can start to layer some of these ones that are a bit brighter up, and that will give it, those bits will come forwards. But you can also just really soften that down, either with a fingertip. I'll do it more when we've got the bit bright bits over here, or you can use just a bit of damped on there. I'm going to do that over here. I'll show you that over here because this is very small at the moment I'm working, so that'll just bury it. But you know, the dome brushes, the bigger dome brushes are great if you've got A4 and above. Really. So I'm just going to pop in here. Just start to build up some of these lovely shapes. Putting this down again. A little bit of a tint in there. Sometimes when you remix it, like this might happen where, you know, you think, oh crikey, it's built up more than I wanted it to. And I didn't want it, you know, I didn't want it to be quite as intense. Then as long as there's plenty, you know, you probably need plenty of water on it, so it's like that. But then that's where you can get your little bush. Just put a small bit of water on the end. I'm just dumping mine off a little bit. And just tapping that end off, and then you can just use that to just soften anywhere you feel has got a bit too solid. That works really well for those other layers as well. So that's what the dome brush is for. It just softens everything out. Really nice. Even this bit at the bottom, if I wanted to just soften it a bit. And do that. So that's great. It's the dome brush for that. And then I'm going to then think about which bits in here need more, you know, which need more pigment, a bit brighter, a bit more white or whatever. And then I will just use, like for the really small bits, rather than trying to get a big thick dome brush in just on the edges or where it's particularly bright or whatever, like just very gently soften it down. You can even do that by applying the paint with your finger and go in with some where the brightest areas are, just with the pure white. And again, it's not going to be too intense if you soften it down a little bit. Tap away. Get some of that lovely cloud in there. You know, you can drag it as well. So yes, that's how we, you know, just build up this cloud very simply where it is, you know, where we get in there. It just creates depth. And obviously we've not got a lot of dark in this cloud at all. They're very light and wispy, which we'd expect, wouldn't we, to see on a day like this. That's why they're lovely, because we don't often paint clouds like this apart from the summer. Where we get more of these stratus kind of types of clouds. So yeah, just tap away until you feel, whether that's with your other brush or a finger where you're just kind of bringing in some of those wispier clouds. And come back now and just start looking at the other little layers that I've got there. And moving it around quite. You can really just, you know, make circular motions as well. That helps you. And then we're just noticing really where the brighter spots in there are. And whether this is like a pink going into a corally colour or whatever colours tones you've got on your clouds, that's fine. And it's nice to look at them from a distance a bit as well. So if you can look at your work a little bit, it feels more real, I think, with the cloud. You just need that distance sometimes to be able to see it. I'm just going in with these light ones here. Yeah, I think I'm going to just stop there actually. You know, we can of course make things brighter in places if you want to make them even brighter, then by all means, you can make that contrast even stronger if you want to. Or you can just, leave it. And because the other thing sometimes is we get quite, we can end up overworking and we can't see those blues between, but you can always put a bit of blue in, back in if you feel like you're losing that, for example. There, I can just pop that back in between. So that's the joy of acrylics. Pop it straight back in there, look, and then you've got that a little bit more depth again between to show what's going on between there. So that's another thing you can do. Like that. Just pop it a bit back in. So yeah, so it's a lovely experience as that. So I've kind of come up to here. I've got I've got a much darker like horizon line there um before the before it kind of goes to the water on the front there. So I'm just going to pop that in. Just above there. You can do it the other way around as well if you want them to. And we'll break it up a little bit. You could use Payne's grey or something if you wanted as well. And then I'll move that. Before we can go into foliage and things like that. But I'm going to take a pause there, see how you're getting on, and hope you're enjoying the just lovely exploring clouds and mists and colours. Okay, so obviously that's that then thinking, which do I do next? Do I do, do we do, which is a good question. It was the same this morning. Do we do the sea or the beach or both? I'm going to try and get some of the beach in actually. I could go and just do the foliage actually, but I'm going to do a little bit of the beach here and then have a little bit of it kind of underlapping some of the sea here because that sea is beautiful colour. So whichever colour you see is it's thinking about that. And sand. So sand's a really interesting one. I'm gonna actually save this bit of the palette to do to come back to do the sea colours. Actually, I'll put the sand on it as well. So sand colours are interesting. So you can I'm going to go back in. I'm going to need some white on there, definitely as a mixing, as a tint. Now, sand is really interesting anyway because some sandy colours are really warm. You know, you can see that, you know, they're really warm. They've got lots of yellow undertones or ochre, yellow ochre undertones. Um, some are almost like you almost get this pinkish glow, especially at sunsets and sunrises as well. And some literally look orange again in those sunsets and sunrises. And then you could get these cool toned sands as well that are in the shade that really do look sometimes a blue tone or a purple tone to them. So we can pretty much mix a tint up and add those different colours to get that effect really. So, you know, we're just being mindful when we're doing it all, you know, having a look to see what kinds of colours we can see in there, you know, where is a lighter area, where is a slightly dull area. So you can also buy a great colour, buff titanium. It's actually not a colour, it's actually titanium white without bleach. So this is what titanium white looks like before it's bleached with white. So it actually, buff titanium makes a fantastic colour. I'll just show you what it looks like in comparison. I'm going to show you how to mix it. It's a great colour for sand, for stonework, for paths, you know, for gravel as a base, and then you can warm that up, cool it down as well. So it's how do we get that from white? Well, we can start with white. We can bring in a yellow, depending on how yellow that is. So I'm going to bring that in here. And just move that down a bit. I'm going to warm colours at the bottom so I don't mix them up. So I'm having one of those paint days today where I think I actually just need a different colour. I just need a new tube of it. Anyway, so I'm going to bring some yellow in. I'm going to use that yellow anyway later to do some of the foliage on the tree. So I'm going to get a little bit more out than before. There we go. So we've got white and yellow, or you could do, if you've got yellow ochre in your kit, that would be great. I'm also going to bring out a little bit of burnt sienna. Well, this one's actually, that's burnt sienna. It's a warm brown, because sometimes if the sand's slightly warm, that's tin. Well, this one is Venice red, but it doesn't really matter which. I'll get the burnt sienna out because that's more typical in a lot of kits. And I'm only getting a real tiny touch of these out because I'm only going to use a very small amount of pigment in there because it's very strong. And I've got some blue, so I can give it a bit of a blue hue if necessary. You can also bring in burnt umber. He says, find it where it is in my kit. There it is. It's there all along. Which, if we've got cooler sands and we don't want it very warm, we can use this to take out the warmth. So we can actually use it to take the warmth out of it if we get it too warm. And we just, again, use tiny amounts of that. Don't need much of it at all. What else could I pop in? And I could pop in, if I really want to warm it up, I can put a bit of red or orange in it as well. Burnt sienna's does warm it up. Sometimes when you get that pink tone, you can literally add a bit of pink, or you can just add a little bit more red to it. So we can do all sorts with that. I'll get some red. So I've just got Cajun red in here, which is a warmer red anyway. As I said, you could use orange as well. So there we go. So if I want, so I'll just mix up those different ones really. So let's have a little look. So if we're wanting, so this is a warm sand. So I can go in with the white, some yellow, and again we're just looking at how much of a combination. This isn't like the sands that I've got here are really bright and vivid, and that's, you know, the sun's directly on it as well, and it's very pale. So this is much warmer. So then I've got these, let's move that up, yellow and white there. I'll go in with a little bit of burnt sienna. So you can see we're getting that almost kind of a nice warm undertone to it. And we can add a bit more if we wanted to make it. So it does give it almost a slightly pinkish bit. So I'm just going to pop that down. So that's one sandy colour. If I want it more pinky in tone, I can add a little bit of either red or pink to it. Let's try that. This is the warmer sands. I will do a different mix for the colour. So yeah, so getting those little things. Or you can add orange to this. Depends what's, you know, what else. Then we've got this. You do get sands that have got like that pinky colour. And then we've got some that are, you know, and you can have them even more yellow sandy, can't you, as well? So if I want to, I'm just being mindful not to use my blue water as well, because the blue will make it muddy, because it's when I'm looking at warm colours there. So if I wanted to make a, you know, a very shadowy kind of sand that's really got no warmth to it, and it's a bit dull, it's out of the sunlight as well. I'm going to start with a white base. Just mix some small amounts up here. I might add just a touch of yellow, but not much, very small amount, just to give it a little bit of colour. And then I can go in with a very small amount of burnt umber, that's the brown. And this does take the colour out of it. Takes the warmth out. So you can go in with something like that. That's much cooler, but you can go even cooler than that. You can then go in with a bit of blue, just taking that bit off my hair. So I'll just go with a tiny bit of blue, and we're only adding small amounts to that. So this will make it really kind of shadowy, a really shadowy colour. There's no warmth in this at all now. Taking out, that's just really taking it out. So this is sometimes the, you know, those shadowy colours you get on the sand that are, it's still like it's got some of the sandy tone in it. I put a bit just of buff titanium back in there. You know, you can see those. So they're like, you know, warm, getting cool, and we can even warm that up even more by adding more yellow in there on that side. That's my blue's got in now, what's happened. Or we can go bright like this. So I'm going to do a different mix with this, because this has obviously got much more white in it. It's really quite bright. So I'm going to go in, mix a fair bit because I want to use this one. I'm going to pop in just a little bit of burnt sienna to warm it up a little bit. But I'm just not putting much in, but I want this to be nice and bright. Tiny bit of yellow. There's a bit of warmth in there, but not much. Just get a nice contrast though with the yellows and the blues as well. Works quite nicely when you've got an opposing palette on a picture. So sometimes it's just nice just to add a little bit in there, just so it works really well. And then, you know, just to give it a good test, see if you're getting near. Okay. I'm going to make mine a little bit more pinkish now. Adding some red in there. It's still nice and bright. Oops. I mean, the vast variety of tones we can get on that palette is fabulous. So I'm going to use this, home with this now, but I'm going to add a little bit, add some white as well as I go. So I'll just get this on the majority there. And I'm just bringing it round, like where I think it's going to go underneath. Following that line of sea there. And again, we can pop these colours on and then add the lighter colours and mix as we go. That feels a bit warmer over this side. So I'm just going to add a little bit more warmth with a little bit of a tiny bit of yellow. Just pop in. But obviously under this bush here, then it's going to be a bit cooler. It's just really this bit that feels a bit warmer there. And back in. A little bit of this white down. Where it feels much more, much brighter, I've just add some white into that mix there, really. Anywhere else that you're feeling like it's let's get in that brightness. You can just add that. And I've brought mine in a little bit because I want to bring that sea a bit over the top slightly by making it some of it a bit thinner. A bit more warmth there. So we can make that, we can make these tones up once we start to see them and we can see a slight difference in there. We can start adding them in. Then there's the shadowy bits underneath here as well. So I'm going to use a different brush for that. And I'm just going to bring in, what colour that could be. So you could use a Payne's grey, or I'm going to just use ultramarine because it's a good colour as a base. Mix a tint with that in. And depends how bright you want that contrast, because that's, if you look with that, it's quite bright. So it's, do you want that? I might put a bit of that, a bit of the sandy colour in with it, just so you can bring that in, just to soften it down. And I also might take it a bit out with a tiny amount of burnt umber, but not much, but enough so that it's not really very too bright. And I'm just going to go in and just place a little bit in there where it is and see if I can tolerate that. Sometimes we think with the shadow, if it's really, really bright, I'm not sure. And you can use your finger as well to soften that down as well. That's too intense for you. Just going to pop in there. I think that's going to go. But, there's no real rights or wrongs about those tones that you select. It's just what's right for you. Just really to replicate the shadow, isn't it, actually? Not that. I'll bring that up here. And again, soften it down if you want, or make that more definite lines if you prefer that kind of a feel. There we go. So that a lot of that's to do with our style as well and what how we want to put that bush mark on there. And then, you know, this lovely sea coming over the top here, we can just have a little explore. I'm going to bring a green in as well. In here, just in case I fancy just dropping a tiny bit of green. I'm going to have to get a, oh, there it is. I'm going to use a different palette in a minute, so I'll just put a tiny bit on there. And then we're just kind of mixing up what we think with goes in for. So something like this, it's very turquoisey. You know, I'd want a nice light colour, like water. Not the cerulean. I think this is almost dry actually. And then a little bit of cerulean in there, so it's really light. And then it might try a tiny bit of green. So you've got this lovely greeny blue. I've just used that green in there. Just so it's a little bit different to that. And again, it's just trial and error with different amounts of those colours in there. Well, we have to add some more light in there. It's drying so fast in here. I have to just pop a little bit of water in one, I think. Until, you know, until you're happy with the colour that you've got, that you've mixed. I like that. And again, a lot of it's to do with what you like as well, because like some of this has got some blue in it anyway. So I'm going to do a similar thing in that we're going on to an ordinary, like round now, a slightly bigger one, and I'm just going to get that in. Just bring it in. I'll start to add some colours in it as well, and I'll do the waves over the top. So it gets lighter over there. We can actually replicate that by just bringing it right down. So I want to just bring in a little bit of blue back into it over the top here. So got a sense that there's a bit more depth to that water. Like that. And then I'm just going to thin down this really light one. On some mint colour. Just really thin that down. Add a bit more white to it. Like we thinned down the cloud. And then just kind of just drag that over the top of that sand that we've already got there, so it's nice and thin. So it's overlapping and it's a little bit more translucent. I'll thin it down even more so that we've got what we want in there. And then go in with those lighter waves over the top. So that's, you know, we're just thinning this down so that it feels like it's going over the top of the over the top of there. And this is where I'll need some white because I want to get that foam in. And again, we can do, it's almost a little bit like the clouds. We can just add little bits to that. Yeah. And all I'm doing there is I'm just going in with the tip of my brush, just kind of dropping it in and wiggling it about really. Just to get that sea foam on the edge. Sea foam is just quite loose, really, and natural, that's it, isn't it? So you can just start to create some of those wave edges there. This one's very gentle, just overlapping on the beach. And it doesn't really need to be really complicated. You know, you can, if you wanted to soften anything again, you can. Just see where you're going with that. There might be some areas in the water that you want to just make a bit softer, a bit more blended, but kind of have them, those lighter areas there. And again, you can thin it down, you know, you can thin these colours down over the top. So it's really lovely to do, actually, really nice. And sometimes you get just a little tiny bit of shade underneath, you know, at the front edge, where you could just have a little shadow, maybe where it's a bit, you're getting a little bit of this coming underneath. And that's all I do on there. If you've got the one with lots of waves on it, you know, you're making sure you've got all those dark waves in place. There's the shadows, then the mid-tone colours, and then finally the highlights. We always put the highlights on the top, unless there's a reason, you know, a reason not to do it, like it's the lighter layer is underneath, but generally the light hits the waves on the top. So you'll see that. If you used your mop brush, just make sure you clean that off because that can dry very quickly and hard on there. So I'm just going to give that, especially when it's warm weather outside. Make sure you don't end up with because they do dry really hard. Oops. And I'm splodging that now in here. I'm just going to try that quickly. And then we've just got to look at the foliage. So I'm just going to take this off here. And the foliage is the really interesting one when we've got tropical, because, you know, as I said before, we don't always do that. We don't often do, unless you're painting tropical pictures, we often focus on the foliage that we know the most. I'm just getting my flat back out, so I'm going to use this. So I'm looking at different kinds of greens. So you might have, for example, sap green, and you might have a darker green in your kit, like, find it. This is probably hooker's green. Yeah, it is. Actually, it's really dark when it comes in a set. Sometimes earth green, depending on the make. The one's darker, the hooker's green's much darker, so it's good to have a contrast. And then I'm going to do what I always do. You may have green, you know, light green light as well, which is basically light green. It's got much more yellow in it. It's more leafy, it's more bright. Or I'm just going to use yellow. I'm going to use a nice warm yellow in this one. And I'm going to go back to my white as well, because I'm going to need some are a bit more intense than others. And then what we're trying to do is create, you know, bases. And I'm going to go right from the back. So I'm going to look at these at the back there. And this is where all we're thinking about really to start with is getting in some kinds of texture. So I'm going right back there. And all I'm doing at the moment, very loosely with my brown, just putting in the darks. So I'm looking at the tops of these. Look, I'm going all over. I'm not really going to see much. They look very strange to start with, but it will build up. We'll build up a picture. I'm just going to get the dark ones in, and I'll neaten up those edges, and I'll try and create a bit of movement that looks a bit like it might be a palm shortly. But at the moment, I'm just trying to get things into place, and I'll do the next layer over the top of that anyway. And then this one over here, well, we've got something that definitely looks a little bit more palm-like, don't we, there? So again, maybe a bit of directional movement, but I'm just getting in the, the fronds of it really. And then you can, from that, you can use that as a base and start to put in different foliage shapes. And then there's another one. Might need to bring mine out a little bit further to be fair. Another one in the background just there. And you can put as many or as little in as you want. If you think, oh, I've had enough now. I don't want to put any more in, then don't. That's absolutely fine. So I'll put this one in. That one's looking a little bit more like we've got, the palm shapes behind it. So I'm doing that. So at this point, it's going to look a little bit odd. What I want to do now is bring in some other colour green. So I'm going to bring in yellow. It's a bit yellow. It's still in the background. So I'm not going to bring in, I don't think, anything massively bright. Now you can try a bristly brush or something else. And I'm just going to bring in a few little highlighty bits. Enough to suggest that there's a bit of movement and a bit of difference in colour, but not enough to maybe see the shapes. What we'll do is, it'll be when we apply these other shapes on the front that we'll start to see a difference in there. So I am going in with a little smaller brush, or I shouldn't say more pointy brush actually. I'm just going to, just use a brush at the top of the point. This one was quite thick, but wasn't really one. And just pull some of those shapes out a little bit there. And if you can see any just little throngs coming off, like little spiky foliage or whatever, you can just add a few of those because it gives, although it's in the background, can't see masses, it just gives a little bit of context once we start putting the other bits in. So I've gone back in with my dark one. I'm just pulling a few through, not masses, just enough that we might think, oh, that could be a palm, but we're not altogether sure. And then with the other colour on the top as well, just picking out a few brighter ones. It might be that you're going in with just a slightly lighter colour. So there's not an awful lot going on there. These ones, I'm seeing some brighter ones, so I might just pop in a few little colours through there, like there's a bit of a yellowish colour I'm seeing in there. But again, I'm going to save my brights for the very front of it. But I might just create a few little throngs again here. Just have another colour coming off it. Just pop a few. Just tap in some of the foliage there. Create a gap between it. Just so we're starting to see, oh yeah, this may be a bit palmy now it's by the sea and everything. And then we make our way further forwards with any foliage in front of that. So then there's this one that's big, that's got much more to it there. So I'm going to go in with, still going to put my shadow in. So I'm going to go in and put some of these darks. Now, I don't think that's going to be dark enough. I want to go in with, I want a bit more depth here. So I'm going to add some brown, some of that. I'll just move that over from now. This burnt umber I got out earlier. It's really dark. So I'm going to add that to the hooker's green to get an even darker colour. Test it and see. You could even add, or you could add like a dark blue to it as well if you wanted a blue tone. Let's get a bit more of that in there. And I can layer it up as well to make it thicker. Right, so near the base here. I'm going to get in where these throngs are, but near the base, I'm going to get this on as the colour that's underneath it. And kind of hanging over. And just coming up over the top there. I'm trying to get a little bit of the directional movement. And this isn't, the neatest at the moment. That's fine. And I do want some, I'm going to add some, I'm not sure, add a bit of blue to this mix to make it even darker. Because I want here, on the base of it, between, I just want that a little bit nice and dark. And then we can put the brights over the top of that as well. So I'm going to go in now, start to put a few throngs on with a nice, a brighter colour, this sap green one. Coming more into the foreground, and then I'm going to top up with the yellows. So I'm pulling out some of the fronds. And then pop over some of these yellows just on the edge. I think some of them look like they're on the edge and some of them are on the edge, you know, the side of the, just highlighting. Just highlight on the top of the branch as well. So we're just getting some of these shapes through. My brush is getting a bit overloaded and a bit like wide with the paint, so I need to get it off so I can get that point back in. In fact, I might just bring this point here. Yeah, so we can bring that in, you know, that brighter colour. Make it work for us to create the shape of those throngs coming through with that highlight on there. And we'll get, you know, we're getting the gist of what's going on there. And then if you wanted to add any other colours like the burnt sienna, you're seeing these kind of like more, you know, they're a bit, these are the colours that are just popping through there in some of the foliage, then, you know, pop those on by all means as well. Start to weave in some of these kind of like, almost like a feeling that it's a bit burnt, it's really warm. And then again, anything else that's below there, underneath the trees here. Popping a bit of shadow under it first, and then pop in some of the other foliage on top. So we're just finding a colour, a base as well, that we can put these other things over the top of, so that that shadow will come through. What's the do? And here we've got a little bit again of this interesting foliage coming through there. We can't see a lot of it. We've just got to kind of guess really what's going on with it. Again, we'll pop some, just get some of these more bright. We can make a really bright green with the yellow green. So we can do that as well. That's something else we can do. And you can also just put a tiny bit of white. Just careful not to flatten it because it does take the colour out, but actually sometimes it's good if you're wanting that just to get a bit of a brighter highlight in there or whatever, that helps. You can always put a bit of warmth back with the yellow. And we're just going through trying to make some shapes. All these different colours down here at this base. I can't quite see what that is, but it looks bright, doesn't it? And lovely. You know, and then obviously again, some of the nice foliage over here. I mean, you can try if you've got some of the big ones. You can try a fan brush. That's another thing to try. I'm just showing you what you can do with just a small amount of brushes. But, you know, try if you've got any brushes like fans and things like that, give them a try. You might want to try it in a bit of paper to start with. And all we're doing is we're pulling the shapes in that we can see and around, really just exploring and experimenting with these different foliage shapes, actually. And that very quickly, you think, oh gosh, there's loads, but actually very quickly, with those different shapes that we're making, that, you know, starts to come in and fill a lot of the foliage space in there. So I'm going to bring a bit there. Use thinner brushes as well, if that's if you want to do it. And then we've just got this kind of bush here. Maybe there's a little bit of a reddy colour there. And then we'll be ready to put the palm trees over. That will really give it away as well. So it's how we build up these lovely layers. So I'm going to go in again. I'm going to go in with a nice dark. I'll just go in with my hooker green here. That I'm going to do hooker green and blue. Put that really deep foliage in there. You can shape. This shows how deep this bush is. When it's very dark, we know that that's a big deep bush with all those in there. So I'm just tapping this now, happily tapping where I can see like areas of shadow. And it comes together very fast. This bit. Once you just let your brush go and do the kind of wandering. I'm putting it dark at the bottom here as well, because often you get that underneath the bushes and things where the cast and the shadow underneath, and they are deep underneath there. And then I'll just go over with those brighter colours and tap that in. I'm just going to literally use the top of my brush to do that, but you can use any technique you want. And it's a bit more in the shadow here, so I'm going to just go in just with this sap green, which isn't that warm at the moment, and just leave gaps between, just build up. You know, you can go in with a brush that is going to give you the, you know, stippling effect or whatever it is that you want. And if you do have any brighter areas, you can just add a couple of those as well, just where it catches the lights. That kind of creates an extra dimension of fullness, some depth in there. It's not just a, you know, flat. And then I'd go in for this very bright, much brighter. I'm just mixing these colours up here. Much kind of brighter there at the front, a little bit darker there. And do a bit of the sap green in there, but then I'm going to go real bright. I'm going to go with some yellow, I think. So we can use nice bright colours on their own. In nature, it really just gives it a nice pop of colour. And a bit of a tint in there as well, just to pick up some of those colours. It's plugged in. Oh, okay. Let's see. Look what's coming out. I can see. See. Yeah, so just keep going through any little bits of foliage. In different tones. Till you're happy with it, really. And then, you know, see if there's any areas of shadow or anything else that you want to pop back in. And I'm just going to pop those last two palm trees in there. So, yeah, so it's really, really just about exploring the colours and things like that. So I'm going to pop um, the palm tree in. I'm actually going to go in with a combination of a bit of blue and red. So it's almost a bit purpley light colour. Like, so I'm going to put in the tint with a bit of blue and a bit of red. I've got a bit purpley tinge to it, a bit more light on here. Now, you can use the edge of a flat brush or a sword brush or something like that. Or you can use a rigger, which is a long thin brush, or you can just have a little go at just popping in. I'm holding this right at the end. This is a long, long brush, but I always like to just pop it at the end. So where's it going to there? When it comes up. Loading up in case that's all still wet, just loading up so it goes right over the top. Nice light touch. We won't get to see all of it once anyway, because it might actually just be covered by a few bits of foliage. And then you can always put a bit of a darker, tint underneath here on it, not tint, but a bit of a darker colour on it as well, or a shadow side, a shadow colour. Underneath one side. And then if you have just these kind of sticks, we can then, I mean, you can wait until you've got the foliage on if you prefer, or you can just get them into place. I'm going to bring this one in. There's kind of one just, let me see where that goes, but I'm going to pop it. And then it starts to make a little bit more sense once we get the palms in. All those other shapes will really help. So yeah, so if you're working in big, you can explore with a brush there, like a fan brush. I'm just going to, for the moment, just get the main fronds in, and then I'll add the foliage over the top. I find that easy, and it's just about being nice and light, directional. With these, we can add, as I said, we can add the foliage over the top. I'm doing that before I add anything to it. And already we're starting to just add such a lot of context when we get one thing in, draws our eye. We just know this is, not a local landscape. And from there you can just build in, build in the colours that you want. Looking at where the green's gone. And so get some shadow in place, and again, just use a darker version if you want. So I'm just going to pop in a few shadowy bits near the centre. That helps it feel like it's going down as well, which is what we would hope. Okay, and then we're just softening, all this will start to soften down so you can add your foliage in there. A little colour on top of that. Some of the different colours. Any of the shapes. There's some colours like those yellow tips. And then you can just have a little look, do you need to put any shadows back in? I probably would actually put some more shadow, maybe mine a bit dark there. A bit more spindly. Could probably keep this a bit more spindly. I've overworked it a little bit, so just soften that back down again. And just have a little look. Do you want to do anything, say, to the palm? Uh, the palm trunks, but and I'll probably just finish there because we're trying to do little studies here, see what we can, we're just exploring a whole range of things today, actually, which is really nice, particularly the foliage and the sea, which is not something we tend to paint a lot, is it? So, it's just exploring all of those textures and things. And I'll just take a final pause there, and I hope you enjoy that one because it's really nice. So I can see here, there's little bits, I can see that horizon is too harsh up this side, so I'm going to soften that down with a bit of, not sea colour, but interlude, a little bit of colour there, just to, don't want a big solid line. There's a bit of a solid line there, but not over here. Just putting on a bit. So this is what you can do this at any point. If you, the best thing to do is have a little look at your work from a distance, and see if there's anything, particularly in the morning, that you want to change. But I come and chat to everybody and hope you enjoyed it.